Good evening. In this broadcast, Time, the information program from the television channel Ostankino. Today, subunits of the Ministry of Internal Affairs and Defense on the territory of Chechnya conducted severe clashes with the aim of crushing unlawful armed formations there. This was noted today at the meeting of the members of the government with the Security Council of Russia, which was chaired by the Prime Minister Chernomyrdin. Present at that meeting also were representatives of both chambers of the Federal Assembly. According to the press service of the Russian government, missile bomb attacks were launched on the more significant fortified objects of the Jahar Dudayev supporters in the area of Grozny and Gudermes. As a result, 4 stockpiles of ammunition were demolished. At the meeting, it was emphasized that after Dudayev's rejection of talks offered him several times, actions of the unlawful armed formations have acquired a heightened momentum and cruelty. Hence, at the meeting with the head of the Cabinet of Ministers, a decision was adopted to expedite actions to liquidate the unlawful armed formations and, by doing so, to provide safety for the peaceful population of Chechnya. Only a few moments ago, we received a report from Itartas in which it says that at 20 hours 30 minutes, a Russian destroyer conducted a missile bomb strike on the Chechen capital. This interview for the press was given by Jahar Dudayev today from a fortified bomb shelter. Rejecting talks on peaceful regularization of the conflict, the retired general left his suffering people the option to hope in God under the open sky, and also to the appeals of fanatics to prepare for a desperate resistance. Here's the up-to-date report received today from the Temporary Information Center of the Government of Russia. At the access points to Grozny, defense positions are being fortified. The units most prepared and loyal to Dudayev are redeploying to the mountainous areas in order to organize guerrilla warfare. In the village Znamenskaya, the local population surrendered to the representatives of the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Russia 10 units of combat technology. Today, there were no losses among the personnel of the units of the internal forces. At around 3 o'clock Moscow time, several bombs were dropped on Goreshala, which is half an hour prior to that on the Cossack village Dolinskaya, which is not far from Grozny. Itartas reported that 2 missiles exploded in a region where Jahar Dudayev's home is located and his relatives. Nothing is known about casualties. Mujahids, which have arrived in Grozny, are being kept on reserve, but it's known that per day they receive from $800 to $1,000. In connection with Jahar Dudayev's rejection of dialogues and the disarmament of unlawful formations by decision of the Security Council of Russia, the unified group of forces in Chechnya and around it has been ordered into action. Troops have moved toward indicated strategic spots, blockaded the basic roads, established control passing points not only on the border with Chechnya, but on access points to Grozny. Aviation is carrying out bomb blitzes on strongholds of the gunmen. You see, one of the helicopters of the internal forces of the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Russia is firing at their fortified positions. In response, the shots of machine guns from an anti-aircraft artillery installation are heard. New columns of paratroopers and internal forces of the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Russia are pulling up toward Grozny. Basically, the mission is being accomplished simultaneously. The troops themselves, as you can see, are living in not very conducive conditions. But there is no grumbling. Each person understands his mission and is fulfilling it as is appropriate for a soldier. The soldiers and officers and militia, as you can see, were forced to set up camp in an open field, and because of above-zero temperatures has turned into sheer mud. One doesn't have to repeat how difficult it is here to set up camp and simultaneously execute military protection, conduct frequent talks with representatives of local organizations, social societies and groups. In Mozdok, the Ataman of the Union of Cossacks of Russia, Martynov, met with the press. He said that the Cossacks, tired of chaos which reigns on Russia's southern borders, support the decisive steps to create order here for the defense of the Russian and Russian-speaking population against unlawful armed gunmen. The Cossacks are prepared to mobilize their hundreds and help the troops and militia. In the Chechen Republic, from now on, an authorized representative of the President of Russia will be stationed. Pursuant to the decree of the President, the authorized representative must coordinate the actions of the federal and local organs of executive power and the interaction between the representatives of the Russian President in rim areas and districts of the Northern Caucasus while they resolve questions on normalizing the situation in Chechnya. The authorized representative of the President in Chechnya is the Vice Premier Nikolai Yegorov. Having returned from Ingushetia, the deputies of the State Duma, headed by Vladimir Bauer feel that not all possibilities have yet been exhausted in the political regularization of the Chechen conflict. An open letter on this matter was sent to the President, the Prime Minister, and speakers of the chambers of the Russian Parliament today. Two measures were dedicated to the events in Chechnya in the Russian Parliament: the Duma Council and the press conference of the delegation which returned from Ingushetia. The deputies are attempting to influence the situation through means accessible to them, that is, draft laws, and the Duma Council examined such a document. Through it, it's presumed that the decisions of deputy delegations in conflict zones must be obligatory for the forces of the Ministry of Internal Affairs, the FSK, and the Ministry of Defense. Ivan Rybkin already submitted this draft law to the President, Premier, and members of the Security Council. What their reaction was to the document, it's not known yet. However, in Duma circles, the number of supporters and opponents to the draft have divided equally. But even if the law is adopted by the lower chamber, it still has a difficult path ahead to be ratified by the upper chamber and the President. The situation in Chechnya changes hourly, and today observations were shared with the press by deputies who've just visited Ingushetia. Members of the delegation met with military servicemen, local residents, and refugees. Immediately upon returning to Moscow, the delegation was invited by the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Chechnya to visit Grozny, and just as official authorities will be extended by the Duma to the deputies, they are prepared to immediately set out for Chechnya. Since the beginning of December until today, 12,577 peaceful residents have left Chechnya. This was reported by the head of the Federal Immigration Services, Tatyana Regent. In the Republic, there are still 100,000 Russian-speaking population left, mostly pensioners and the needy. In a word, those who lack the strength or means to leave. For example, a two-room apartment in Grozny currently costs 1 million rubles, the same price for a cargo vehicle to the territory of the Stavropol Rim area. Currently, in areas bordering with Chechnya, Northern Ossetia, and Ingushetia, and also in the Krasnodar and Stavropol Rim areas, reception centers were set up and temporary housing for refugees. Tatyana Regent denied rumors spread in Dudai of propaganda about an ostensible new deportation of Chechens. Not one person will be deported against his will. After the situation normalizes in Chechnya, conditions will be created for the return of all those who desire to their former homes. But for now, all refugees from the conflict zone are provided humanitarian aid. They're supplied with food and temporary housing. Through the efforts of the Ministry of Emergency Situations, to Mozdok, more than 300 tons of food and medications have been delivered. Around Chechnya, 15 points to receive refugees have been opened. This was stated by the Vice Premier Nikolai Yegorov today. The Ministry of Healthcare, according to the Vice Premier, faces an enormous task in vaccinating the population of Chechnya. On its territory during the last 3 years, almost no preventative measures were undertaken, and in the region there is a spread of various illnesses, including such as tuberculosis. According to official sources, in Khasayurt and the Khasayurtovsk region of Dagestan, there are around 20,000 refugees currently. More precisely to say, refugee mothers with their children. At night and day we receive these refugees. And currently in our nurseries we have already around 308 people. 58% of the refugees are children. I want it all to end and I want to go home. Now about security measures undertaken in Moscow in view of Chechen events. Army combat vehicles were not brought into Moscow yet. This was stated to the Russian Information Agency by the head of the Center of Public Communications of the City Internal Affairs of Moscow. According to him, combat carrier vehicles are standing on Koltsevaya, or Belt Street, controlling the entrance into the capital. Their patrolling within Moscow in the next few days is not foreseen. Full approval over the actions of Russian leadership in Chechnya was expressed by the head of Georgia today, Edvard Shevardnadze. He emphasized that President Yeltsin is guided by the highest interests of the country and acts in compliance with the Constitution of Russia. The government of Japan has expressed deep concern today over the news of combat operations in Chechnya, emphasizing its hope, however, that the situation there will not worsen but will be resolved through peaceful means. At the same time, the official representatives of Japan again have repeated that the issue is exclusively on an internal matter of the Russian Federation. The same point of view, as well as other high-placed officials of the United States, was expressed in an interview to the television company CNN by the director of the CIA, James Woolsey. Also, he emphasized that President Yeltsin is forced to adopt several strict measures in order to influence the direction of matters in the necessary way. And today, Anatoly Chubayev, speaking at the first Congress of Russian entrepreneurs, stated that the government is in dire need of pressure, in the positive sense of that word, from healthy entrepreneurial forces. Personally, the entrepreneurs, as they said themselves, had gathered precisely for that purpose. Their first Congress they call a unifying Congress. Participating are representatives of the most varied business unions and associations of Russia from almost all the regions of Russia. Immediately agreeing to avoid politics, its participants are conducting purely professional talks, analyzing the state of domestic business, defining prospects for its development. Upon the conclusion of the Congress, a declaration will be adopted in which it will state that only unifying efforts we can defend our ideals and realistically influence the economic policy of the authorities. We are not with the rights nor with the lefts. We intend to unite the economic and, on that basis, political forces in the country in order, first of all, to raise up the economy. This is of utmost importance now, because if we continue to fight with poverty, it does exist. If we raise the level of the well-being of the population of the country, that will be our most important objective. The association, the Roundtable of Business Russia, which gathered its first Congress from today on, will become a powerful social organization of businessmen which will express their opinion in, for example, forming the budget or discussing the taxation system on their behalf to hold dialogues with the government. Today, President Yeltsin returned from the Central Clinical Hospital to his suburban residence, where, after the operation he has endured, he will continue his course toward rehabilitation. This was reported by his press service. Scheduled for the 23rd of December, the Almaty meeting of the CIS leaders will not take place. As Interfax reports, the heads of 9 out of the 12 CIS countries severally issued a proposal to postpone the session until February. The session is postponed, but concrete interaction of the CIS countries continues in the near future. To further arm the air forces of the CIS countries, an airplane of a new generation will be added, the N-70. It was created at the Kiev aviation plant in the name Antonov. The N-70 plane completed its first flight. It's created for the transportation of cargo and technology for civil aviation and combat air forces. The implementation of the latest propeller-ventilated engines gives an opportunity to develop very high cruising speeds with minimum fuel consumption. The latest equipment allows flights at any time of day or night and in any weather conditions. According to the intergovernmental agreement, the first series of N-70s at 500 airplanes will be produced at the plants of Samara and Kiev, and the N-70s will be exploitable as early as 1996. One must note that in order to create a plane similar to the N-70, leading aviation firms of the European countries have joined into a special consortium, Euroflag, but their project for now exists only in the sketch phases, as was emphasized at the press conference. But today, a decision was made to create an international consortium which will include Russia, Ukraine, and Uzbekistan in the aims of developing and mass-producing and leading into exploitation the family of transportation planes. As of tomorrow, prices on gasoline in Moscow will be raised. Interfax reports that by approximately 50%. As a result, number 76 gasoline will cost 650 rubles and number 92 brand 750 rubles per liter. Also, the mayor of Moscow has signed a resolution to increase the transit fare on city transportation from the current 250 to 400 rubles. In Nizhny Novgorod, today the problems of the agricultural industry were discussed. A federal study center on rural reform has been created there. More than 70 farms of the Nizhegorодsk district filed a notice of reform to the local administration according to the tested model here during the last year of rural restructuring. The Nizhegorодsk model, by the decision of the government, will serve as a basis for Russian land reform. Just now, in Nizhny Novgorod, this country's first federal study center on the privatization of land and reorganization of state and collective farms has been founded. We must create in our basic economic science branches of this center so that people can study the proposed model and make a choice based on awareness. While specialists are discussing the problem of rural reform, consumers of agricultural goods are discussing its shortage. The last deficit which Russians encountered is butter. From 3,500 rubles per kilogram, the price of butter in Yaroslavl jumped quickly to between 10 and 11,000, and even such an expensive good is absent in the stores. Tired of fighting with the monopolistic dictate of processors, the farms are selling milk directly, casting sanitary doctors into shock. And the Moloka plant, left now with raw materials, has stopped producing butter and is gradually decreasing its personnel. When the Yaroslav Moloka plant was privatized, we offered give 51% to us, the producers of the stock, and then we would work as a unified system. We would open stores, and in a brotherly way, we would divide all the profits. No, they were greedy, and now they are naturally with nothing. Of course, the matter here is not only how profits of the plant are distributed. If the number of head of dairy cattle in the Yaroslav district during this year has decreased by 15,000. It's even strange that there are any dairy goods on the shelves at all. Of course, there will be butter, but not like last year at $1 per kilogram, but between $3 to $4 per kilogram. And such proposals exist already. The prospective price on fish depends on the effectiveness of assimilating the Pacific Ocean. According to Japanese specialists, it's capable of feeding all humanity in the 21st century. That's why Japan so insistently fights for its interests on Russian-Japanese dialogues on fishing. But today, these talks in Tokyo have been interrupted. They will resume the 26th of December in Moscow. The last 2 days, dialogues were reminiscent of a conversation between a blind and deaf person. The Japanese side made no concessions, insisting that the terms of the agreement 1995 should remain as previous, that is, not lucrative for Russia. Here in Tokyo, the Japanese side needed to receive a guarantee in the framework of the agreement 95 on monopolized fishing in territorial waters of Russia, because the proposal brought here by the Russian delegation on new forms of cooperation lays a basis for the cooperation of Russia with Japan on fishing at least until the end of the century. Instead of a monopolized fishing in Russian territorial waters, the Japanese delegation offered regions of its waters where Russian fishermen traditionally had caught sardines and herring. But the resources there have been exhausted for Russia. Work in these waters is not lucrative. That means for fishing in Russian territorial waters, payments must be increased. The Japanese side was not prepared for such a posture and asked for a 10-day timeout, and hinted that it would sign the Russian-Japanese fishing agreement for 1995 on Russian conditions in Moscow by the end of the year. Strictly speaking, time is in Russia's favor, as the migration paths for the fish in 3 months will pass by Russia's shores. Fishing questions today were also one of the topics of the Russian-Iceland talks in Moscow, but at a higher level, at the level of ministers of foreign affairs. The talks ended with the signing of a declaration on the basis of a relation between the Russian Federation and the Republic of Iceland, the first of its kind, all-encompassing political document in the history of the relations of the two countries. Later, Andrei Kozyrev and his counterpart, Jon Balden Heinebalsen, briefly stated that a series of questions was discussed as they expressed themselves of common European thematics and two-sided relations. The Icelandic minister diplomatically noted the depth of the analysis made by Russia in cooperation in the framework of the Partnership for Peace, and emphasized, quote, discussion will allow us to more fully reflect the topic at our subsequent conclusions with the NATO partners. Such a delicate question for the two-sided relations was raised as fishing. The basis of Iceland's economy, with a 250,000 population, is fishing and the fish industry. During the course of many years already, Iceland is in a debate for the right to fish in the so-called niche, a restricted part of the Barents Sea, which is considered to be a zone of common economic interests of Russia and Norway as well. And today, 1 ton of cod on the world market costs $1,500, so there is a reason for debate. But the ministers didn't go into details about these differences, stating only that in January, the Russian-Iceland-Norway talks are planned. The Diplomatic Academy of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Russia is 60 years old. This event was celebrated today in the ancient homestead on Stozhenka Street near Crimean Bank, where previously there was the Institute of Red Professorship. Congratulations were heard, advice and wishes of luck and light in the newly restored building. During the years of its existence, the Academy has prepared more than 5,000 highly qualified specialists, among whom there are famous diplomats, lawyers, economists, and journalists. Many who came to congratulate the Academy on its anniversary spoke of it as of their own alma mater. Others indicated their spiritual closeness with this unique academic institution and pronounced the sacramental words, "We're of one blood." And here's what the rector of the Academy told us, Sergei Kalistratovich Romanovsky. In historical terms, of course, this is not a long period of time. But now, this is a mature academy, that's what I would say. The shooting at the White House in Washington Saturday night was targeted. This is the opinion of the Secret Service of the United States investigating this incident. Today it stated that 4 bullets were found, one of which had penetrated the window and entered the building. The Secret Service, for now, has no information which could clarify the question, who did shoot and with what purpose? In Bulgaria, early parliamentary elections were held. The activity of the voters was sufficiently high. Candidates of the pre-election coalition, the Bulgarian Socialist Party, and the Farming Union, which bears the name Alexander Stombalevsky, founders of the Liberal Peasant Party in the beginning of the century, and the political club Echo Glasnost, heir of the first dissident organizations in Bulgaria, according to preliminary reports, have received almost 45% of the votes of the electorate. In relation to the winner 60 days in the pre-election marathon campaign was the Union of Democratic Forces, an anti-communist radical blue coalition with approximately 24% of the votes. It appears that the final results of the voting will be known in 1 or 2 days. The ex-president of the United States, Jimmy Carter, is currently on a private peacekeeping mission in Bosnia-Herzegovina. Yesterday he spoke with the head of the country, Alijev Izetbegović, and today he met with the leader of the Bosnian Serbs, Radovan Karadzic. The Serbs place special hopes in the mission of Jimmy Carter, who arrived in Bosnia on the personal invitation of Radovan Karadzic. But here's the paradox. The Serbian side demonstrated no concern for the problem of security for the American ex-president, and along the road from the airport to the Bosnian capital, the motorcade was forced to use a contingency route because the main road at that time was being fired at from Serb positions. The question arises, what new peacemaking plan from Karadzic can even be an issue, because one of his basic points is the unconditional ceasefire around Sarajevo. It seems very likely that the ex-president was intentionally deceived. Manipulating him, the leader of the Bosnian Serbs intends to win time, soften the position of the United States, and as a final result, to attempt to force on a new plan of the territorial division of Bosnia-Herzegovina. That's what observers feel. The unexpected involvement in the process of Bosnian regularization of the godfather of an entire series of political compromises of late evoked a negative reaction in the ranks of the international contact group. According to the Russian Foreign Affairs Department, the new Karadzic ideas are aimed at undermining the efforts of the contact group. And as the personal envoy of the President of Russia in former Yugoslavia, Alexander Zotov, stated, I quote, "The Karadzic initiative remains his personal initiative, and the response reaction of Jimmy Carter remains his personal reaction," unquote. Time will show how private the American ex-president's mission is, but it's too early to draw conclusions. One of the pilots of the American reconnaissance helicopter shot down over North Korea died. This was reported from the White House. In his statement, the President of the United States, Clinton, called this tragic loss unnecessary and demanded from North Korean authorities the immediate access to the second American helicopter pilot, who, according to the President, is alive and well. Around 120 people occupied a vacant building in downtown Paris. The initiator of the squatter action is the 82-year-old Abbat Yet, who usually preaches humility. Hence, he attempted to attract the attention of the government to the problem of the homeless, and a short while after the action began, he was granted an audience with the Prime Minister Franz Balladur, who promised not to evict the squatters with the aid of police, especially since in defense of the action, the public responded with an enormous demonstration. European problems were always in the field of view of our information television agency. Now there will be news on this topic in the program Time More. In Vienna, a regional branch of the television company Ostankino has opened. The problems of a unified Europe and the entry into the common house of European countries, partnership for peace, and the special position of Russia in broadening NATO to the east, transforming the CSCE into a constantly functioning organ of common European functioning, many other problems of the old continent are sufficiently and in detail illuminated by special and staff correspondents of the Information Television Agency. But not once in the 30-year history of a core network abroad, television radio journalists of Ostankino never gathered, especially in the center of Europe. The meeting in the Austrian capital gave us all a unique opportunity to hear advice, to criticize, to give each other topics for reports and information programs. Elevate the overall level of our work is the main topic of the session, which occurred with the directors of Ostankino, Russian information agencies, the Union of Journalists, journalists, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The achieving of the objective of an all-encompassing and multilateral European broadcasting is the objective of the new regional office of the television company Ostankiно, with headquarters in Vienna. The special interests of the branch office operating on the funds of Russian commercial interests are abroad: Austria, Switzerland, Italy, and Slovakia. In the last years, not one of our television channels had, nor has today, its own correspondents in these countries. Home, family, career. These are the priorities of residents of the old continent. Will our own life values take their proper place? It's a matter of work and time, including that of television journalists. In the new Vienna office, we are three: the correspondents Sergei Frolov, Yuri Vybernov, and the cameraman Yuri Kovalenko. With great experience in work in television broadcasting and familiar to you from reports from Russia and Europe, they have already begun to equip their branch, and by the beginning of the year, you'll see their first materials. 1 week ago, the artistic directorship of the Bolshoi Theatre revealed its intentions to stop productions. This measure was caused by the conflict situation which developed in the theatre. Today, on that issue, a press conference was held by the head ballet master, Yuri Grigorovich, and his main conductor, Alexander Lazarev. I hope that we will put on the Queen of Spades. This was stated at a press conference in the Beethoven Hall of the Bolshoi Theatre by Alexander Lazarev. The Queen of Spades and the Golden Century. These are two productions in the repertoire planned for the 28th and 29th of December, on those days when the artistic directorship and the troupe of the theatre intend to strike. To date, as was said in the newspapers and in the electronic press, an opportunity to explain the position was enjoyed only by Vladimir Kakunin, the general director and company. Today, these opportunities taken by Yuri Grigorovich and Alexander Lazarev, first of all, to tell everyone that the decision to express non-confidence to Mr. Kakunin was made by the staff of the theatre, not only the artistic directors. Secondly, that they don't at all refute the contract system per se. The only condition of the creators, as they call themselves, is to see at least the document being prepared and receive an opportunity to participate in discussions. Regarding the panel, which according to Kakunin is to become some sort of a supreme power in the theatre, in their opinion it has a right to exist only in the case that it will consist of masters of the theatre: Ulanov, Simonov, Satkilova, Nesterenko, Zhuraitis. And the main thing is the conflict in the Bolshoi, they feel, has reached its climax. In the theatre, everyone, including Grigorovich and Lazarev, are absolutely exhausted by the protracted story, which has only one solution: a decision, no matter what kind, by the government. The ancient military music played by the Presidential Orchestra opened the exhibit The Order of St. George from the fund of the government sanctuary in the Moscow Kremlin. 225 years ago, this order was instituted by Catherine the Great, the Order of the Holy Great Martyr and Trophy Bearer George, as one of the highest military awards of Russia. This order, elevated by the ideal of accomplishment noteworthy in service and valor, was bestowed on the military for outstanding service to the homeland. Sufficient to say that only 25 people were esteemed of the honor to become cavaliers of the Order of the First Degree. Among them, Suvorov, Kutuzov, Potemkin, Tavrichisk, Barclay de Tolly. The names of all the cavaliers, as you know, are engraved in gold in the marble of the most triumphant Georgian hall of the Bolshoi Kremlin Palace. And these displays are evidence of a certain modesty of the monarchs. Nicholas I had an Order of the Fourth Degree, just as Nicholas II, and he, namely, holds the last 1913 statute of the order, according to which to the number of St. George awards was gold weapons. This one, for example, belonged to General Vurko. And the four-level Georgian Cross was instituted, the most esteemed mark of distinction for the higher military ranks. These two crosses, awarded to Georgy Konstantinovich Zhukov, earned by him in the First World War. This exhibit may be modest, but for us it's especially dear, because it's connected with the names of the best commanders and the best soldiers of our home. The last, after sports, will be, as usual, information about the weather, but in Moscow it is such that it deserves special attention. 60 Muscovites suffered from extreme cold, and 7 of them froze to death. Absolutely all of these victims were intoxicated. This was told to Interfox by the Department of Healthcare of Moscow. Meanwhile, according to the Oceanic Meteorological Center, in the next 2 days, the cold in the capital will not subside. All the best. Attention, our rivals are playing and winning, the Greek soccer players. They've made another step toward the finals in the European Championship. In Athens, the Greek team beat the Scottish team 1-0. Stratos Apostolakis used the 11-meter shot. This was the fourth straight victory for the Greek team. Good evening. And so the Greek team is the only one in our subdivision without any losses with 12 points. The soccer players of Russia have 4 points after 2 matches and the 4th place for now. I'll remind you the price of victory for the European victory is 3 points. The main prize of the Izvestia tournament in Moscow tomorrow will be competed for by the Czech and Russian teams. I'll remind you, yesterday in a tense match with equal chances, the Czechs on the way to the finals defeated the champions of the tournament, the Swedes. Martin Struck, a Pittsburgh Penguin player, scored the victory goal, and the score was 3-2. In the success of Russian hockey players over the Italians, there was no doubt. However, ours needed the advantage of 7 goals. After Igor Korolyov's score, the desired was achieved, 8-1, and perhaps victory will be had at the Izvestia tournament. On the first day of the new year, along the route Paris-Grenada-Dakar, the raid marathon will start, and the symbolic start for the Russian auto racers, headed by their team Kamaz Master, was on the Vasilyevsk Bank near the Kremlin. Almost 100 racers, mechanics, and journalists are embarking in search of new adventure. A dual success at the World Cup competitions in Italy was achieved by the Russian teams. The victory was effected by the first team in the rally, was realized at the finish by Yelena Velbe. Participants of the snow circus, women skiers in the World Cup, made yet another stop in the French Alps. Victory was celebrated by Vreni Schneider from Switzerland. In Altenburg, Germany, another cup tournament, one of the most prominent drivers of the world, the Olympic champion Wolfgang Hocke, brought the quartet of the German bobsledders to victory. And the unexpected meeting of 2 more drivers, the current world champion in the Formula 1 races, Michael Schumacher from Germany, the famous French champion Alain Prost, who's already left big sports in France. 2 world celebrities seemed to return to their childhood, enjoyed themselves, and created an ocean of delight for viewers. Good evening. According to the Oceanic Meteorological Center, tomorrow on the Barents Sea, a new cyclone will shift in. It will bring warm and humid Atlantic air to the north of the European part of Russia. In the Baltic countries, in the northwestern region, in the Leningrad district and the Murmansk district, and also in Karelia, in the zone of an atmospheric front, it will be prevalently cloudy with some isolated snow, with southerly winds increasing during the day, -7 to 12. On the Kola Peninsula, -1 to 6. In the Arkhangels district, in the Nenets Autonomous District, and in the Republic of Komi, it will be cloudy with some isolated snow. On the coast, some blizzards, temperatures -7 to 12. In Komi, -20 to 25. In the Volgovatsky area, partly cloudy skies without precipitation during the day, -20 to 25. An anticyclone, which today is situated over Moscow, will gradually shift to the Penza district and will bring clear and cold weather to the central, eastern, and southern parts of Russia. Under the influence of an anticyclone, cold will remain in the central and central Chernozem area. During the day, -19 to 24. On the central Volga, -20 to 25. On the lower Volga, in the Rostov district, -8 to 13 during the day with some isolated snow. In the Stavropol and Krasnodar Ramirez in the northern Caucasus republics, cloudy with some periods of snow and rain and icy roads. In Chechnya, it's cloudy with some isolated precipitation, drizzle, -2 to 4. The cold eastern air will cause the temperatures to drop further on the majority of Ukraine, and in Belarus, -14 to 19 degrees, in the west of Ukraine, and in Moldova, 0, -5. Partly cloudy skies without precipitation. Beyond the Caucasus, in the zone of an atmospheric front, as previously, cloudy with isolated precipitation during the day, +1 to 6. In Armenia, around 0. In St. Petersburg, tomorrow, it will be slightly warmer. At night, -14, 16. During the day, -9 to 11 degrees. It will be cloudy, but without precipitation. In Moscow, dry with some very slight clouds. Winds are weak. It will be as previous.